and it's going to be a very interesting time that we have together. Okay, we are in the book of Genesis, back in the book of Genesis. As we step into the new year, we took 3 weeks off as we contemplated both the Christmas story and the New Year's. So finally it turned on, so I can advance my screen. There it goes. Okay, as we step into Genesis chapter 42 today, what we're going to see is that the Lord begins to unfold his plan in a very clear way. This is amazing stuff that we're about to see. It would make a great, cereal, not a one you eat, but, one on television. It'd be a great, show series that would show all the, they probably made one, but anyway. It is just an incredible thing as God begins to unfold his plan. And that is what is going on. The plan to save Israel unfolds. Now, even Joseph didn't understand about this up until today. He started to figure it out. And he was the one that God had called to lead the deliverance. And he was to the place where now he starts to see it himself. And so he is doing the work today in the story that is in front of us of making sure that God's plans are carried out. But he does it in a way that doesn't let his brothers off the hook. His brothers have been naughty is a soft word. They sold him into slavery. They were first going to kill him. That's how much they hated him. And then they sold him into slavery, and by this time they thought he had died long ago in Egypt. That he had, once he got to Egypt, sometimes he didn't live very long once you got there as a slave because you were put to work in areas and places that were not that health-oriented. And for Joseph, though, he landed well in Potiphar's house. And he got great favor, and his life was preserved, and he prospered. And then he ended up, because of Potiphar's wife and her lies, he ended up in Potiphar's prison. And but again, it was the king's prison, so there's worse places to be. He could have been in a normal bad prison where prisoners died of all sorts of stuff, but instead he was in the king's prison, and then he was put in charge of that prison. And then when the right time had come, God elevated him in a day to the ruler of Egypt. there was Pharaoh, and then there was him ruling Egypt. And so that is where they have been. And Joseph began to do his job. God had showed him Pharaoh's dreams, had given him the interpretation. There's going to be 7 years of plenty in Egypt. Then there's going to be 7 years of famine that are so bad, everyone's going to forget the 7 years of plenty. And so Joseph's job was to store up the grain to make sure that Egypt prospered. Now, he stored up so much grain over those 7 years of plenty that he had enough not only to feed Egypt, he had enough to feed the region. And the word went out that they had grain, and Egypt was about to get very wealthy because everyone was going to come from around the region and buy grain. For them, there was so much grain, they weren't going to run out. And so they could sell it and make a lot of money. And that was part of Joseph's job, working with the foreigners who came in and not extorting. He had the grain, they needed it. The market is set by how much people are willing to pay. And you can bet they negotiated with Joseph. Now, when we see later how Joseph treated the people of Egypt, and he treated them that way because he was a great negotiator, how did he treat the nations? Because they weren't the people of Egypt. So hard negotiator, yeah, that was him. And we even see it in today's story as he recognized what God is doing. So we start in Genesis chapter 42. What we've heard is that the famine had gone everywhere around that region. Canaan and everywhere was having the same famine that Egypt was having. Remember, those areas had not gotten the warning. The 7 years of plenty, if they had 7 years of plenty outside of Egypt, were followed by the 7 years of famine that would make the 7 years of plenty be forgotten. Outside of Egypt, that's what was going on. They had 7 years of famine that were the most severe famine that any of them had experienced. And God had set Joseph up to make sure that the entire region wasn't wiped out. So Jacob, and now this is where we pick up. Jacob saw that there was grain in Egypt. So Jacob said to his sons, "Why are you looking to each other?" He said, "Look, I have heard that there is grain in Egypt. Go down there and buy some grain for us there, so that we live and do not die." Okay, so there's some parts of this story that are fun just because of the fact that Jacob is very blunt. Okay, and he's talking to his sons. He says, "Why are you looking to each other?" And what it means, and that's not the way most translations handle this, but that's the literal way it should be translated. He's saying, guys, you're looking to each other to solve the problem. This problem is beyond you. Like, Simeon, how are you going to take care of this problem when your brothers are looking to you? You're not. Judah, how are you going to take care of the problem when your brothers are looking to you? You can't. There's no way to do it. And then Jacob says, hey, I got an idea. And the idea is this: we're not going to solve this problem. We need help, and I've heard there's food in Egypt, lots of it, and so we need to think about going to Egypt. And so he tells, he says, Egypt has got food, and it did, and it had gone around the region, and he says, so go down there and buy grain so that we can live and not die, because that's how desperate it was. If they did not get grain, they were not going to make it. It was that simple. And so he sends them on their way. Then 10 of the brothers of Joseph went down to buy grain in Egypt, but Jacob did not send Benjamin, the brother of Joseph, with his brothers, for he said, so he does not meet with harm. The sons of Israel arrived to buy grain among the ones who were coming for the famine, for the famine was in the land of Canaan. Joseph was the ruler over the land. He was the one who was selling grain to all the people of the land. The brothers of Joseph came and bowed down to him with their faces to the ground. You got this scene happening and unfolding before our eyes. And of course, movies have tried to capture it. Animated, cartoon movies have tried to capture what it would have been like for the brothers to come and bow down before Joseph. Now notice, it's 10 brothers. It's the sons of Leah, Bilhah, and Zilpah take the trip, not the sons of Rachel. The reason the sons of Rachel didn't go, number one, Joseph was already in Egypt, although everyone thought he was dead. And number two, Benjamin was so precious to Jacob as the surviving son of Rachel, his favorite wife, that he didn't want to let him go. This also is a bit of a word about how he thinks about the 10 brothers and their protection. You understand? He's saying, I'd send him with you guys, but I don't trust you to watch over his life the way it needs to be watched over. And by now, he may have gotten an inkling, maybe, that the brothers that knew more about Joseph's demise than he thought he was dead, knew more about his demise than they were letting on, okay? And so he's like going, I'm not willing to trust Benjamin to you guys. And he's just too precious to me as the only surviving son of Rachel. And so you understand that's a clear statement of favoritism. I'm willing to risk you 10, but not him. Okay? So the same favoritism that had been shown all along to Joseph was now being shown to Benjamin. But it's really interesting, they didn't treat Benjamin the same way. Okay, and it was clear they did not treat Benjamin the same way as they did Joseph. I think they had learned their lesson. We're not going to do that again. That was a mistake. You can imagine how many nights they woke up with regret. Okay, it comes out pretty clearly in today's message, but they were filled with regret. As they matured, they realized what a great wrong they had done. And there was no way to be absolved of it. They had to live with the fact that they, in their minds, had killed their brother. I was talking to someone today about the way that people grow up. And generally speaking, as we grow older, we may grow up or we may not grow up, but one of the things that gets us to grow up is responsibility. That's part of our maturity process. All of these brothers were a lot older than when Joseph went off into captivity. They had grown up a lot. They had faced life's consequences. Let's just talk about Judah for a second. Remember what he went through. He had lost 2 sons by now. Okay? He had lost a wife by now. I mean, that grief matures you, and it makes you into someone other. You may have been a vengeful, spiteful person, but after you go through stuff that is near to you, earth-shaking, it changes you. It matures you. It makes you more thoughtful, and life is more precious. And so that's just part of the process of life. These guys are older now, so you can bet that they were dealing with the fact that they had done this to Joseph. And again, it's going to come out during the course of this story. So anyway, he says, hey, you guys go take the trip. He doesn't want Benjamin to go with him, doesn't quite trust them to keep him safe, sends them down, and they go down to Egypt. We don't hear much about the trip, but we do hear that they end up bowing down. Seems to me there was a dream someone had about the brothers bowing down before him. By the way, some of the commentaries I read said, it's really kind of odd that they'd have to show up before Joseph, because you would think that he'd have lesser administrators to deal with everyone. However, when you're dealing with international politics, that's what we're dealing with. People are coming to Egypt. There's treaties and alliances to be worked out, because some of the people coming, you're going to have future alliances with. You're going to require of them in the years that are coming, because you have insight. The insight is going to last 7 years. And after those 7 years, we're going to make sure that they pay back with interest everything that we're giving to them. There's ways that international politics, he has to be the one that deals with the international politics. There's no doubt about it. That's just the way the world works. And so the brothers come in, and they end up in front. This is not just one guy coming in saying, I need to feed my family, which is, I'm sure that type of person did not end up in front of Joseph. This was a whole retinue of people, and show up, and they want to buy a significant amount of grain. And so now Joseph is in the position of having his brothers bow down before him. Verse 7. When Joseph saw his brothers, he recognized them, but acted as a stranger to them and spoke with them abrasively. He asked them, where have you come from? They replied, from the land of Canaan to buy food. Joseph recognized his brothers, but they did not recognize him. Joseph remembered the dreams which he dreamed about them. So he said to them, you are acting as scouts. You have come to investigate the vulnerable areas of the land. They responded to him, no, my lord, your servants have come to buy food. We, all of us, are the sons of one man. We are honest men. Your servants are not scouts. Okay, we're not talking Boy Scouts. Anyway, so Joseph knew them, and then it says he remembered the dreams he dreamed. His behavior is based upon the dreams that he dreamed. Because right after it says that, so he responded to them in this way. It was based on the dreams. He understood now even more fully what those dreams meant. His brothers are before him, and so now he acts based upon the dreams. Now that's pretty impressive. God was giving him these dreams. By the way, we literally do not have an initial interpretation of those dreams that Joseph had, except the most shallow level of interpretation. Okay? That Joseph would be elevated above his brothers. However, someone who understands dream interpretation, especially the guy who had the dreams and now was in the second most powerful position in Egypt because of a dream he had interpreted, or 2 dreams he had interpreted, understood some layers of interpretation. And so he's remembering his dreams. He's remembering the parts of the dreams that we don't know about. Because, he just said to his brothers, he gave them a report, but that doesn't mean that we've got every detail. Because when you tell a dream, you edit out. You better edit out the extraneous details, because no one else is going to listen to them. They're going to go, by the way, if you want people to shut you off when you're telling your dreams, make them long. Okay? And you just edit them down, and you make sure that you don't keep all of the details in, or when you're telling someone a prophetic word, even the same thing, or how God spoke to you. You want to make sure that you make it as concise as you can so that you can communicate the point. So we don't have all the details of Joseph's dreams, but we do know he did. And so now, based upon those dreams, he responded in a certain way to them. Again, it's not out of vindictiveness. It's not out of anger. By the way, a lot of people will accuse him of vindictiveness and anger because of the way he treats them. But it's not about that at all. It's about him now understanding the dreams at a much higher level. And again, when we have dreams, we may not understand them all initially in the way that even the prophetic words that we get, we may not understand them all initially in the way, as they kind of flesh themselves out. I had a real, at MorningStar right now, they're doing School of the Spirits on Friday night. School of the Spirit, not spirits. Okay, anyway, we don't want ghosts flying around. But the School of the Spirit on Friday nights, and they had ended, they hadn't done that for a lot of years, and now they restarted it. And so anyway, on Friday nights, there's now the School of the Spirit, which is all about training. It's basically what we do on Friday nights. We never stopped. I thought they were still doing it too, but they had stopped years and years ago. And I just never caught on to that fact, because every time I was up there was a conference, and they always had a Friday night meeting. I just thought it was their they normally had Friday night meetings. They didn't. It was only during conferences. There were some years their conferences, they had 3 conferences a month. So, they almost did have Friday night meetings solidly, and that's when they stopped doing the School of the Spirit. But anyway, so I was up there last week and at the School of the Spirit, and one of the things Rick does, he teaches a short message, and then he says, okay, now we're going to put this into practice. And because they're just starting, he's trying to sharpen people. And there's a lot of generic words that are given. And he's trying to challenge people to specificity. If you've hung around here long enough, I try to get specific in my prophetic on Sunday mornings, where I'm trying to get something that is a little bit more specific, which is a good way to do it. So during the worship on Friday night, I just thought, I'm going to scan the room and see if I can see an angel pointing at someone or what's going on. And by the way, I have not seen an angel pointing at someone yet as I scan a room. But I'm always waiting for that first time, right? And so anyway, so I scan the room, see if the Lord highlights anyone to me. And I kept going back to this one guy, okay? I just probably scanned the room 3 times, and every time I did, I was drawn to this one guy. That's a clue, by the way, okay? And so, anyway, so I thought, okay, Lord, what do you got? Nothing. I had nothing for him. I'm thinking, well, I can't prophesy over a guy I got nothing for. And then a little bit later in worship, I got the picture of a spiral staircase. Okay, spiral staircase going up. And as I was parsing what that meant, I had no idea. I mean, literally, I'm going, okay, what's a spiral staircase? We're all familiar with Jacob's ladder, which was really a staircase, but, a spiral staircase. So I'm thinking, well, I just don't think I have anything to be able to share. That's honestly what I'm thinking. I don't have anything to share. And it's not necessarily about me getting up and sharing anyway, a prophetic word, because it's for everyone, right? And so you don't have to be the Johnny on the spot. But then a guy got up and he said, hey, there's a gentleman over there I have a word for, and it was the guy. And I went, oh, I'm paying attention to this. And he calls out the guy, and he gives him a very encouraging word, not a lot of specificity, but a very encouraging word. And you understand by specificity, hey, the Lord showed me in worship, and he showed me that he loves you, and that he, is going to use you in this particular way, but nothing to that specific word of knowledge thing which brings specificity to it. So, as I'm sitting there watching this, the Lord says, I gave you 2 words. I was like, the first word was I want to give him a word, highlighting him. The second word was the spiral staircase. It was for him. Now, at the time I got that vision picture, I didn't know it was for him. They were disconnected, and so I know it's for him. And so a couple other people were in line. They prophesied about other people, and then there was a little bit of a pause, and I thought, okay, I'll get up now. And I got up, and I just called him up. I just called him out again, and I said, this is what I said, have you lived in, you understand, I'm teaching you as I'm doing this, okay? Have you lived in a house that had a spiral staircase? Are you living in a house that has a spiral staircase? Or are you hoping to live in a house with a spiral staircase? I've learned. Okay, I've given a word up there already this last year where I said, hey, has anybody had this experience? And a guy came up to me after the meeting. No one responded, and so I went to more of a generic interpretation of it. But a guy came up to me right after the meeting, and he said, yeah, it was really amazing. I had this really vivid dream 2 nights ago that I had that experience. But I hadn't specifically said, or had a dream. And by the way, I gave 2 words that night, and the first one said, I said, or had a dream, but I forgot to say those words, and so it taught me a lesson. And the lesson was this: make sure that you're covering your bases. If he had said no to those 3 questions, have you ever, are you living, or would you like to live, is that something your goal? I would have said, have you had a dream about a spiral staircase? I just know how people are. They don't want to step forward into a word unless it's their word. So anyway, the guy says, well, I've wanted to build a spiral staircase. And I looked at him and said, that's good enough for me. And as I applied it, and I'm going to share the interpretation, but you understand, I have so much background on this word that if you were trying to prophesy this word, you would not get where I got, right? Because I knew when we studied Jacob's ladder, we talked about the fact it's a staircase. There's no doubt it's a staircase. We call it Jacob's ladder because that's our tradition, but the Hebrew word means staircase. It can refer to ladder, but when you got angels of God ascending or messengers of God ascending and descending, that means they're passing each other. Do that on a ladder, okay? And, okay. So I understood the spiral staircase instantly was about the provision of God. Messengers, angels of God going up into the heavenly realms. And by the way, that's what we do whenever we pray for someone. We ascend on the staircase of Jesus Christ. We go into the heavenly realms. We make a petition on behalf of the person we're praying for, and we bring the answer back to earth. That's what we do. Spiral staircase. That's a little out of the ordinary. I said to Dawn today, we were talking him back, and I said, Dawn, a lot of the stuff that you get from the Lord is a spiral staircase. It takes a leisurely way, and it develops, and you get up there. I says, I'm a straight staircase guy. Charge! And then you charge back with the answer. But I said, so the application for the guy was simply this. Number 1, we had a word of knowledge. The word of knowledge was the spiral staircase, and he knew this word was for him. Number 2, God has made you differently than most people. You are, in fact, a spiral staircase is often viewed as more elegant, but you're not going to get your words the same way that other people get them. Do not compare yourself to other people because you have been designed differently. By the way, every one of us should hear that word. Okay? But for whatever reason, the Lord wanted him to hear it that night and gave me the picture of the spiral staircase so he would believe it. Okay. And because we're all designed differently, I remember once Dawn gave a prophetic word in a meeting we were at up at MorningStar, and the leader of the meeting went, that had to be God. It was so complicated. And it was, okay? But it was just Dawn weaved this amazing prophetic word, and it was like we're all listening and going, because, like I said, I charge into heaven, grab something, and rush back. She built the case for this word on her way up. And then on the way down, she put it all together. Anyway, so okay. The dreamer, the person who gets the prophetic word or the vision, has far more information than those who are in front of them. And so that's just an example that I gave in our time of what Joseph was doing in his time. He was putting together the pieces, and because he remembered the dreams, he treated his brothers in a certain way. So, as Joseph Joseph recognized his brothers, and he knew that they needed to be treated in a certain way. And so he said, hey, you're here to scout out the land. Now, that had to throw these guys into a quandary. You never, when you're in 10 brothers against the entire army of Egypt, you guys are here to harm us. That had to be an awful sensation that they were experiencing. I mean, when they heard that, they probably were terrified. Because you're seconds away from being marched out and executed. Because the ruler, as far as they were concerned, was saying, you are not our friends. And if you're not a friend of Egypt and you're in Egypt, guess what's going to happen to you? You're just going to disappear. And they knew it, and they understood. So Joseph puts them back on their heels, and their defense is, no, we've come to buy food. It was like, they probably were like panicked. No, we're all sons of one man. We're not spies. We're not scouts. We're not here to look at the land. It looks like they're a scout troop, doesn't it? I mean, they've got 10 people. It looks like they're there because they're taking notes. How many spies did they send into the land of Canaan later? 10. 12. But 10 of them were bad, okay? But they would send out about a dozen. By the way, they would have sent a dozen here, but Benjamin can come and Joseph was gone at their hand. So, anyway, they say, no, we're not here to scout out the land. And I mean, I just want to let you know, this would have been a terrifying moment for them. This was not like, well, no, that's not. This is like we are seconds away from death if he does not believe us. And so they understood the desperate nature. And by the way, he did that on purpose. Hey, you're here to spy out the land. They're backed up on their heels, thinking, oh my goodness, what's going on? And it puts them off their polished game, whatever it is. Because now they're in a fight for their life, and they know it. They aren't really in a fight for their life, because Joseph is their brother, and he has no intention of killing them. But they don't know that. He said to them, no. For you have come to scout out the vulnerable areas of the land. They responded, your servants are 12 brothers. We are the sons of one man in the land of Canaan. Know also that the youngest is with our father today, and one is no more. They were wrong about the one is no more. But they spoke what they knew. And so, talk about an unreasonable response. No, we're all the sons of one father, and we're here to buy grain. And Joseph's response is, no. They can feel the execution getting closer. That's just the way it is. So they spill out details. Now, you understand, generally speaking, when you're around strangers, you don't spill out your life details. You don't give them too much information that they can use against you. Like people do on social media all the time. Tell me all about you so we can broadcast it and use it to find out how we can best market to you. Okay. So Joseph acts unreasonable, repeats the accusation. And so what they did, by the way, later on, Jacob would yell at them for you gave him too much information. Because they did. But they're so panicked, they're going to give him anything he wants. Because they know they are seconds away from death. And so they say, hey, no, we're 12 brothers. But, one's still with the father, and one of them's no more. And Joseph knows where the one is. He's like, you're wrong about that. I'm right in front of you. But so the two missing, of course, Joseph and Benjamin, the two sons of Rachel. So now Joseph continues forward with his plan. But Joseph said to them, it is what I have said to you when I said you are scouts. You will be put to the test by this. By the life of Pharaoh, you shall not leave this place except if your youngest brother comes here. Send one from among you so that he might bring your brother. You will be kept in confinement, and your words will be put to the test to see if there is truth in you. But if not, by the life of Pharaoh, you are acting as scouts. So he put them together into custody for 3 days. This had to be a very fun 3 days. Wondering if they're going to die at the end of the 3 days. But by then they at least had an out. They knew one of them, Can you imagine their discussion in the prison? Which one of us? Okay, I mean, they got 3 days. They're sitting there. So Joseph's test was simply, the younger brother must come. By the way, that's why Jacob gets upset. Why'd you say you had a younger brother? Because we were babbling. We were terrified. We had to say something. You weren't there, Dad, So he said, your younger brother may come, or has to come. So you got to send one of you home. I'm going to put the rest of you in prison, and you're going to have to wait until they get all the way back. Now, what did the brothers know? There ain't no way in God's green earth Jacob is going to send Benjamin or anyone back to Egypt when 9 of them have been kept in prison. If I send more, he'll just keep them. And so, as they realize this is a really hard thing. If they go into prison, they're staying there. So I think the 3 days in prison is for Joseph to come up with a better plan. Why did he put him in prison 3 days? He wanted to think through his options. By the way, they came and bowed down before him. He did all of this stuff off the cuff. He hadn't thought through anything. I mean, he's pretty fast on his feet. When he got the interpretation of the dreams for the Pharaoh, he gave him the response and the answer to how to be able to take care of all Egypt and save them. But I think right now, his emotions are pretty highly involved. He says, I might not be thinking the best way yet. There's got to be a better plan. And so he puts them in prison for 3 days because it's good for them to be in prison for 3 days. And, because guys, they thought they were murderers. You understand? They had done some awful stuff. And so he puts them in prison for 3 days, but it gives him a chance to pray and think about what was the best plan or a better plan. And he changes his plan. So it's clear the 3 days gave him the opportunity to think through his response to the brothers. And this is just Joseph coming before God again and saying, give me a better understanding of what's going on. What were your plans when I got the first 2 dreams? Okay? And so God begins to show him. So he responds to his brothers a little differently after the 3 days. Then Joseph said to them on the 3rd day, do this and live. There's that, hey, you are about to die, but now you can live. Okay. Do this and live, for I myself fear God. If you are honest men, let one of your brothers be restrained in the house in which you were confined. Let the rest of you go and bring grain to end the famine in your households. Then bring your youngest brother to me, and your words will prove trustworthy, and you will not die. So they did as he said. So don't think I was making up this thing about dying. He says clearly, yeah, if you do this, I'm not going to kill you all. If you don't do this, well, at least the one I got is going to die. And so that is, it's a very clear, stark message that he is giving these brothers. So, 3rd day, he makes an offer. It was an offer they couldn't refuse. I put an image into some of your heads by saying that. That was not very helpful, was it? No. Okay. Anyway. So, do this and live. And he said, one of you is going to, he just switches the thing. He says, it'd be better. One guy can't take back enough grain to have an impact on the household. It's got to be all of them. Because he's concerned about the household. That's his dad, that's his brother, that's the rest of his relatives, his nieces and nephews. Everyone's up there. And, sister-in-laws, all of that. They're all back there, and they're suffering from famine. And so he's thinking about this going, one guy ain't going to be able to do enough. How about if I send, 9 of them so they can carry enough provisions, and we'll just keep one of them here. And so he thinks through his plan. He's well thought through. He's had a couple days. And so he now has a better plan. By the way, the better plan will also make it easier for Jacob to send them back, because it's not unreasonable to keep one hostage when you're not certain if what they're saying is true. It's a very reasonable response. Now, he goes from being this abrasive, took nothing from them, to now he's even being reasonable. And he says, hey, let the rest of you go and bring grain to end the famine in your households. He knew that they needed to do this. He tells them, I fear God. You guys need food. 9 of you can take food back to end the famine in your households. I just need to keep 1. And when you come back again, just bring your younger brother and we're all good. You understand this is a huge difference in tone. Even though the threat's still there. Do this and live. The threat's still there, and there's no doubt the threat is still there. But, he was the head of Egypt besides Pharaoh. So they said each one to his brother, most certainly we are guilty because of our brother. When we saw his soul's anguish as he begged us, we did not listen. For this reason, this suffering has come upon us. Reuben responded to them, saying, Did I not speak to you, saying, Do not sin against the young man? But you did not listen. Now look, an accounting for his blood is required. They did not know that Joseph understood, for the interpreter was translating between them. Joseph could understand everything they said, but he never broke his role, or they didn't know who he was, or guessed. And so he works through the interpreter. And anyway, so we've got the brothers now coming to grips with what they had done. I told you they had a guilty conscience. Their guilt comes out. They think Joseph can't understand what they're saying, and the interpreter's not going to interpret. He's just going to, because you know what the interpreter would say if he heard this? He'd go, yeah, they're just having some talk about problems in their family. Who cares? But Joseph's able to hear it. And so that brothers are saying, now we know what Joseph was going through when we hardened our hearts toward him. Because this guy, Joseph is being unreasonable to them. They think, we're 10 brothers. He should have listened to us. He should have sent us on our way and then we'd come back. But no, now this is happening. And we feel the way that Joseph must have felt. They started to identify. They started to have empathy for what they had done to Joseph. This is how Joseph must have felt. That is amazing. I told you these guys were growing up. Sometimes I look back years ago and years and years, not quite as long ago as Ron can look. But that's just a statement of fact, isn't it? Yes, okay. Anyway, I look back and I think, I'll look back at things that I did that I felt really justified and how my response was. And now as I look back at that, it's part of what I have to ask God to forgive me for insensitivities, because there's better ways to handle things. But guess what? When you're younger, you don't know that. You don't understand. But after 30 years, you look back and you go, yeah, that wasn't the best. Okay? And you just go, I could have done that much better. I regret the fact that I didn't handle it better. And that's where these brothers are at. They're recognizing they're growing up. They are saying, hey, this. By the way, this is life. It's all under the blood. Don't let these past thoughts torment you. Okay? I want to give you a clue. People are crazy. And that means 30 years ago, so were you. And you didn't know everything you needed to know. And the fact that you have regret looking back means you're growing up. And you're growing in the Lord, and you're understanding life a little bit more. But that's all under the blood. You don't have to live there. If you just, Lord, forgive me for that, and now leave it alone. Walk away from it, because why? It's been forgiven and been forgotten by God. And it was probably forgotten by him long ago. It's just that now you're remembering it. Maybe the Holy Spirit bringing it up so that you deal with repenting for it and recognize, okay, now look what you did. And now there's an accounting for his blood is required. It's really interesting. This is, the Hebrew literally said his blood is required. Okay? And it refers to the Genesis 9 thing when the Lord says in Genesis 9:5, I will seek an accounting for your soul's blood. So after the flood, I will seek an accounting from animals, from men. if they shed your blood. Remember all the way back right after the garden, the blood of Abel cries out from the ground. What was it crying out? It was crying out for an accounting because it had been shed by murder. And now an accounting is required, and that is exactly what Reuben is saying. He's referring back to what God taught after the flood. This is the accounting. It is upon us right now. His blood is required. There's an accounting that we are now giving because of what we shed. That is that's powerful. Okay, they understand. The time of reckoning is upon us for what we did to Joseph. Now think about that. The time of reckoning is upon us for what we did to Joseph, and Joseph is standing in front of them. This is God putting together the salvation plan for Israel in an amazing way. So Joseph hears their repentance. He hears everything. And so it says, he turned around away from them and wept. But when he turned back to them, he spoke to them, took Simeon from them, and bound him before their eyes. His weeping did not stop his actions, right? Joseph then issued a command that they fill their bags with grain, that they return the silver of each man to his sack, and to give them food for the journey. They did it for them in just that way. So they lifted the grain upon their donkeys, and they departed from there. Okay, now, Joseph, the brother, is behind the scenes. He's saying, here we go. First of all, that's the one we want, Simeon. Let's take him, okay? Why Simeon? Yeah, firstborn. Okay. By the way, would they have known? I mean, would Joseph supposed to know? No, he didn't, but he did. So the one that was supposed to have stopped all the bad stuff. So anyway, Simeon is taken into custody, but then Joseph turns to they didn't understand his language anyway, so he could say it right in front of them. But this was the command that they sell them the grain. And then they put all their money back into the sacks of grain. By the way, what's the Hebrew word for sack? Sack. I'm not kidding. There's only one way to translate this word in the English language for that reason. You could say a whole lot, but you got to do it. So he said, put the silver back in the sack and give them food for the journey. That's so over the top, isn't it? Now, give them food for the journey even. It's like, what? So he sends them on their way. And so his servants did it for them in just that way. They set it up and they sent them on their way. Now that silver is going to show up again later on. It's not the same as when they come down again and something else happens like that. But so they put the grain on their donkeys and they departed from there. So Joseph was overcome. And he heard them recognizing they're repenting in their own way. Anguish. What did Joseph do? He was the one who had the anguish. Brothers, don't do this to me, screaming out to them as they took him away by caravan and imprisoned him, and he's crying out, and the brothers fade into the background, and in their hard-heartedness, they just sit there and watch. And now he hears the regret over it, and he recognizes that they recognize what they have done wrong. That's pretty powerful. And so he takes Simeon, and he says, hey, you're staying with us for a while. Do you think Joseph went and had nice family chats with him while he was there? No. Poor Simeon. He had to sit that entire time. And then Joseph gave those amazing orders to them, and they returned to Canaan. Now, we're going to pick it up next week with what happened when they got to Canaan, especially when they find the money in their sacks and how they're going to end up being even more afraid as a result of it. But God's orchestrating all things. He's designing the deliverance of Israel. That's what's happening. And we're watching it in real time work out. There's some issues that have to work out. And by the way, the relational issues are going to continue even past the death of Jacob. There's still going to be that tension. The brother's wondering, when is the shoe going to drop? Not realizing that Joseph was a different type of person than what they had known or who he had known before. So God's working out his plan. God's working out his plan in your life. When you read a story like this, you have to understand if he can take all these complex pieces, national politics and everything, and put them together to bring out the deliverance of people, what can he do on your behalf? Probably a lot of the things that we experience as deliverance, and we're suddenly free of something that we hadn't ever seen before. We've got some issue coming against us in our lives. It may be just that complex. God, the butterfly effect, right? The butterfly, the flapping of the wings of a butterfly can cause a hurricane. That's the butterfly effect. That's the theory. That just that input can build and build and build. Now, most butterflies, I'm sure, when they flap their wings, don't cause hurricanes. And we pray against that. By the way, when we pray against hurricanes, we have to make an exception for Miami. I like to call them the sugar canes. Doesn't sound quite fierce enough, does it? Okay. The University of Miami football team, for those of you that are not into football. Okay. So God's already moving on your behalf in ways that we never even see. And sometimes the deliverance is there because he planned it 20 years ago for whatever situation we find ourselves in. So, Lord, thank you for this opportunity to study your word together. I ask that as we go forward in our lives, we didn't be encouraged in amazing ways by how you orchestrated things for Joseph and his brothers and for the deliverance of their entire family, and showed us beyond any doubt that you're in charge of details. In your name, amen.